Ready? Here we go.
Lastly, I'd like to introduce our new social media manager, Lily.
I don't know, dude.
Is that you?
Yeah, but what's that? I just got interfered with. Are you ready?
Here we go, Doug.
And good evening, and welcome to our Sunday night live chat. If you got in on our channel here at 9 o'clock sharp, you may have noticed a little glitch in the matrix. Sorry, just a little technical issue. Every Sunday, we take a deep dive into learning how to live an optimal life, where I try to answer all your questions and question all of your answers. So I invite you to chat in tonight at any time with your questions, your comments. I really want to know what your interests are, your concerns, and definitely your opinions about what we're trying to say this evening. Tonight's topic is relationships, and primarily I'm going to be talking about and focusing on romantic relationships. You know, I continually find it amazing that with all the incredible and clever things that humans have come up with, things we've managed to accomplish, we still get confused and lost in relationships. Seems we know so much about everything else but ourselves. And that's just it. I think a big part of this is we're often lost and confused when it's concerning ourselves, who we truly are. And we carry a lack of understanding, this lopsidedness, right into our relationships so often. So what I'm trying to do with this channel is help you get yourself a little more squared away, a little more in balance with your own personal development, so you can navigate everything in your life a little easier, to include relationships. So after tonight's chat, I invite you to go back to the channel and look at some of the video playlists and check out the various self-awareness videos, to include the ones where I teach you the 4-step path, which is a simple meditation process I developed to help you resolve and prevent constant stress and create balance in your life. Okay, so that being said, I'd like to look at some of the frequently asked questions about relationships. What I do the week prior to these broadcasts is I go out to my friends and students. I still teach quite a bit, and I ask them, take the topic at hand, and I ask them, you know, what are some of the questions you might have when it comes, in this case, to relationships. Last week, so I asked a number of folks, and this is what I got. So I'm going to generate these questions and tell you the answers I came up with. But as I'm doing this, I really would encourage you to chat in with your comments and questions of your own, and we'll field those as we go through the evening. And for some reason, if you have a topic or an idea that doesn't get addressed tonight, we're not going to ignore it. It'll be dealt with in a future chat. So I want to preface this concept of this topic of relationships with some of my initial thoughts, kind of set the playing field. I think that most relationships can be characterized by the words of Charles Dickens in his opening of the book, A Tale of Two Cities. They were the best of times, and they were the worst of times. And relationships pretty much can bring out the greatest joy and the deepest pain. I know I've experienced both ranges, and I suspect most of you have. Relationships can bring out the best in us, and they very often highlight our biggest imbalances. They highlight the worst in ourselves. So the question is, if it's potentially so much pain, why bother? Why do we even bother with them? Well, one of the most obvious motivators for a relationship, a romantic relationship at least, of course, is going to be hormonal, just the biological urge for sex and procreation. And this is the biology of it, and it's not to be overlooked or minimized. But for a relationship to really last and to be part of a plan to lead an optimal life, to support your own quest for balance and self-awareness, there needs to be more. We have to move beyond the hormonal component. And that's kind of where we're going this evening. One of the primary reasons to invest ourselves in a relationship is that it can be a path to learn how to get into what I call a love flow. This is big. This is a foundational concept. We learn how to let love into our lives, to accept love, and how to give love, to let love flow out of us. Letting ourselves accept love is sometimes the hardest part. We can be very giving people, but sometimes due to a lot of issues, we got hurt in the past, or sometimes maybe previous relationships or the way we were brought up, accepting love, letting love in, letting people in can be really tough. But relationships help us with this range of motion. Let love in, let love out. In fact, to actually be true love, it has to be a flow. It has to be equally letting love flow in and love flow out. All right. Relationships also, I think, can be a vehicle for you to learn how to surrender a smaller version of yourself and become part of something bigger. Surrender to something bigger than yourself. Channeling your energy not just to your own personal needs, but into the needs of another. And this, for a lot of us, is difficult. But this is a field of experience that allows us and encourages us to do this. This big concept of love, loving humanity or loving the world, that can be a really tough and really, quite frankly, an overwhelming concept. And it would take a lot of spiritual and emotional maturity to be able to genuinely embrace loving every person in the whole human race. But we have the opportunity to have a starting point for that. If we can start by learning to love just one person, maybe, just explore what loving one person is, we start to increase our capacity, our range of motion for love, and eventually expand out. There's a little story from the yoga tradition where a woman goes to the guru and says, Guruji, I can't wrap my head around this loving God thing. I don't even get it. I can't do it. It's too big. It's too confusing. And the guru says to her, well, do you have a son? Yeah, no, you have a small son here. And she says, yes, I have a son. And he said, well, do you love your child? She says, of course I love my child. He said, that's where you start. So I think that speaks to itself, what I just said, that this is a place for us to get our feet wet into learning how to love, how to become part of something bigger than ourselves. And then over time, it expands out. I also believe that relationships of quality, and this is another, I think, key point, and I'll be coming back to these initial points I'm making throughout the questions I'm answering. Relationships of quality are based on a mutual respect. That is meaning not having power over another person, but power with another person. I'll say that again. Relationships work on a basis of mutual respect, where it's not about power over, but power with. And that will start to help answer some of the questions that come up. I also believe relationship love is not so much about what you do, it's about how you do it. To do what you're doing in a loving way, coming from a loving place. If you go back to the channel, actually the first video I put out on Valentine's Day of this year, I discussed that. We talked about the right Valentine. How do you choose a Valentine's present? How do you do this? And I gave an example of what I just said. It's not about what you do; it's how you do it. It's about not the grandness of the gift, but what it represented. Did you give a gift that was based on you really paying attention to the other person, what they might really want or what they might need? Did it represent a presence of mind and alertness? Was it genuine? Were you really paying attention, or were you just punching a ticket to give a gift? Okay, before I get to these questions now, I'd like to remind you that I'd love to hear from you. Just maybe comment on what I just said. You don't have to agree with me. I fully would welcome some debate here if there's any range for that. All right. So the first question that I would like to tackle, it's kind of a general question. Some of these questions tend to be broad-based, broad brushstroke questions, and then some are really specific and might even be a little age or generational specific, as you'll see. But the first question is this: what is the most important thing to keep a new relationship together? What's the most important thing to keep a new relationship together? So there's a lot of things, and there's books, tons of books written out there about it. The first thing I want to say is that I think what you need to do to keep a new relationship together is pretty much the same thing you need to do to keep an old relationship together. These principles go both ways. And I think the first thing is communication. It's very important all the time, but it's really critical in the early phases of relationship is to establish some basis of quality communication. It's about partially building time and opportunity in a relationship to talk, not just hang out with friends or go to an event where the music's so loud, the conversation's so scattered that you really can't talk. You're just hanging out together, but really have time together where you can talk and communicate. And be patient with this. Not everyone communicates easily. I have to say that a lot of times guys, or especially guys, when you confront them with their feelings, they're not going to be real open. So ladies out there, please be patient with that. And guys, be aware that you're going to have to do some work in this area a lot of times. I know I did. Learning how the other person communicates their needs and feelings takes time and patience. For instance, and this is, once again, I found this in my life, is that understanding that a lot of reactions are not what they seem to be. For instance, a lot of times guys will project anger when really the underlying emotion is fear. So getting to understand your partner in this relationship and how do they communicate their various emotions, and learning how the other person receives love and affection optimally. What's their preferred way to have you show affection and love? Now, for some people, that gift is important. Whether it's the the birthday present or the anniversary present or whatever it is, Valentine's Day, again, Christmas, it's the act of a gift or a card. But for some, it's not that. The material stuff is not important. A lot of times it can be how you spend time. I just want to have your time. I just want to have your attention. I want to know you're on board. The lights are on in somebody's home. So in your communication with your partner, this growing relationship, understanding how your partner gets the message that you love them. What's their preferred way? This is a great conversation for a dinner conversation, a date conversation, I think. Another concept here in communication is this idea of learning to listen. I remember when early on in my marriage, I asked my wife, I said, honey, do you know what the sexiest part of a woman's body is? And of course, she rolls her eyes, expecting something typical for me. And she said, okay, what? And I said, her ears. She looked at me like, what do you mean your ears? Her ears. And I said, a woman who can listen to a man, now that's sexy. And that goes both ways. I think a man who can listen to the woman who can listen to the man, the idea of being able to really listen and be present for that other person, that's very attractive. And listening with less expectation, with less forecasting. I think this old adage is that in order to be heard, you need to listen is very important here. You want to be heard, you need to learn to listen to the other person. And guys, listening without trying to fix something. I'll go back to my own marriage. I've been married over 20 years. I very much was the guy who wanted to fix things. I remember my wife would come home from work early on in our relationship, and she'd be unloading the problems of the day from work. And I was reading that as, oh, she's throwing this stuff at me because she wants a solution. She wants me to come up with to fix it. And I listen, and I start to throw out my opinion, and it really wasn't well received. It wasn't what she was looking for. And it took me a long time. I guess I'm a little thick, but it took me a long time to really realize that all she wanted me to do was listen, not try to fix it. So that's my advice for the evening on listening. I think another component of a successful relationship, whether it's in the beginning or in an older relationship, is this idea of mutual respect. I think too many relationships start with one party or the other having issues, sometimes with the opposite sex, based on maybe bad experiences from previous relationships, or maybe even how they were brought up, maybe the relationship their parents role modeled, for instance, or other relationships they saw. They have some kind of distorted or stereotypes built into how the opposite sex is supposed to be or react or participate. Basically, it's your baggage. It's some of your old baggage. So you need to get really clear on what are you operating out of? Because you need to be moving towards this idea of respecting women, respecting men. If you have a stereotype, if you have some branding that you've done with the opposite sex, it's going to translate into your relationship. And the earlier you get behind that, the better. If you're categorizing all women are this or looking for that, or all men are this or that, you're just dragging a lot of old crap into your new relationship, and it's going to distort it. So just as best you can, become aware of that. And I will go back and say that these types of things that I'm asking you to work on are very effectively addressed with the 4-step meditation path that I teach on this channel. You can go back to the old videos, the previous videos on the channel, and get involved with that 4-step path. It's a really potent self-assessment process to address these imbalances in yourself, your thought patterns, your emotional patterns. And another very important and also too readily forgotten or not even understood idea about a successful relationship is this idea of surrender, surrendering to the relationship. And I found working with a lot of folks, this is a tough one. This is a really tough one to work through. Even in the marriage, whether it's in a relationship or in a marriage. First of all, this idea of surrendering is not about giving in. When two people are in a relationship, it's about there's one and there's another, and 1 plus 1 equals 3. The third thing is that relationship. And this idea of surrendering to something bigger than yourself. Remember, I said earlier that relationships can be a vehicle for you to identify with something larger than yourself, your small version of yourself. And this is what I'm talking about, this idea of surrendering to a relationship, meaning that it's a compromise, perhaps, to the other person, but it's not giving in. It's not letting the other person control you. You have to surrender a little bit of your ego self, your ego identity. Loosen the hold on that. Let the other person have their time, their day. You can enjoy watching the other person be happy. You need to overcome some of that talk like, oh, she's not going to tell me what to do, or he can't control me, that mindset. Remember, it's not about power over another person. It's about power with. That surrendering to the relationship is really about creating that power with another person. Just tell you a brief story is that a while back I had a friend of mine, he came to me and he said his girlfriend wanted him to go to a party, and he really didn't want to go to the party. He wasn't really interested at all. But it was really important to her that he meet her friends and this type of thing, and she really wanted him to go. So he came to me and he said, what do you think I should do? And he said, I think I'm just going to go to the party. If I go to that party, I'm just going to take my phone and my earbuds, and I'm going to listen to the game. I'll go find a place and sit in the corner and listen to the game. If she really wants me to go, I'll show her. I'll go to the party, but I'm going to do my thing. And he wanted to know my opinion. I said, well, here's what I would do. I would leave the phone and leave the earbuds in the car, go to the party, and just let go of your agenda there. Just be there for her. See what happens. And so he said, kind of said he might try that. So anyway, I talked to him about a week later, and he said, I asked him how it went at the party, and he said he was amazed. He said he did leave his earbuds and the phone in the car, and he kind of got involved with the party. He said very soon into this thing, he said, I was having more fun than she did. And so that just speaks to this idea. It was sort of a validation of just let go and really enjoy the joy of your partner. It's not about winning and losing. Okay, it's about working together so everybody wins. Okay. So I have another question here, and this is interesting. What about friends with benefits? I know this is an interesting concept. It's not necessarily a concept out of my generation, but definitely one of my kids. I have two grown children. One's 31 and one's almost 28, and they didn't ask me this question, but someone in that age group did. So I had to think about this a little bit. And, at first, this whole concept of friends with benefits, it sounds good, yeah. But at first it sounds good, but then I said, I have some real reservations here. And I want to make it clear. Anything I say this evening, especially on this particular question, I'm not judging. This isn't about judging or calling things right or wrong or good or bad. But it just seemed to me that this was a way of basically taking care of that sexual need with that, but being a little bit too lazy to do the work on a relationship. Okay. And by the way, I may push some buttons on folks tonight with some of these questions. So chat in and call me out. Tell me what give me your opinion. I'd be more than happy to engage in a little debate, if you will. But exploring this idea of friends with benefits and talking to some other folks, I hear things like, yeah, I'm just too involved with my career right now, or I'm too busy for a relationship. So this friends with benefits, that just seems to fit where I am. I said, really? Kind of sounds like an excuse to me, personally. And I'm thinking, friends with benefits, it just sounds almost, I hate to say it, but blah. It becomes another aspect of a beige colored life. Kind of boring, lacking passion, depth, texture, flavor. It just seems like you're giving into a mediocrity. Now, once again, I may be wrong. I may be, too old school, but it just sounds like a watered down version of what it could really be. If there's no risk here in a relationship like this, in this moving into this romantic relationship, there's no risk, there's no sacrifice. There's no going out on a limb a little bit. You're emotionally out on a limb. You might even be challenging yourself in other ways. Then you might need to look at that. You're going to get what you put into it. The gain you're going to get is going to be commensurate with the amount of work you put into it. I got a comment here. What about true communication between male and female? It's real obvious we don't communicate. Well, and this goes back to that initial. I want to thank you for the comment, and I want to address that. True communication between male and female, it's a lot of work. I'm jumping back to one of the previous comments that I made. It's obvious that we have difficulty a lot of times with this male and female communication, and it's a job. It's work. It's clearly work. But I think that, in my experience, and I've had success and failure in communicating with my wife, and honestly, I'm divorced. I'm on a second marriage. There's times I apparently didn't do it so well, but I've learned a lot of things over life, and I do believe that if you treat each other with respect and this idea of surrendering to the relationship, you have a greater opportunity of setting aside some of that guy thinking versus girl thinking, or woman thinking versus man thinking, male, female. There's apparent differences in communication. Yeah, we have our differences. I have a question later on in the chat tonight that might address this a little bit, this difference between the sexes. We call it the battle of the sexes. This is about communication between men and women, but it can also happen. This isn't just clearly about heterosexual relationships. That happens to be the kind of relationship I'm in. But I think what I'm saying this evening is germane to all types of romantic relationships, intimate relationships. It's the human experience. And we seem to not communicate more often than we do. But if we come from a platform of respect, listening more than we're talking sometimes, the old adage is we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, to be used in that proportion, maybe. So for the person who gave me that chat, and listen on to this evening. Here are some of the other things I have to say when we come into talking about some of the idiosyncrasies of male-female relationship, and then ask the question again, or tell me if you've got a nuance, a further question you might have on that. Okay, so after we talked about this surrendering into the relationship, and we're into talking about friends with benefits. So I want to go back to this. As I mentioned, some of the feedback I've gotten from folks who are involved with that, or advocating friends with benefits, I'm too involved with my career, or I'm too busy. And my contention is that there's a hesitancy here. I see a hesitancy to kind of get in the game. Take a little risk. It's worth the sacrifice. It's worth getting out of your comfort zone. This friends with benefits just sounds too casual to me, too trivial for something that should be much more alive. It should be not black and white, it should be technicolor. If I were to counter friends with benefits, if I were to counter it with a little twist on that, maybe not a different view of that, I would say lovers with benefits. Look at your relationship as lovers with benefits. And what was the benefit there? What's the benefit there? Friendship. Friendship. So, wow, I can have all of the passion, all of that aliveness of a love relationship, a romantic relationship, and the benefit is that this person is my friend. The words are the same, but it's how we're loading the relation. What are we doing first? We're giving everything free play. We're not watering down the romance. We're letting the romance part flourish. You know, romance, the subtle tension of the dance, of the love affair. Let that all flourish, but also bring in that communication, bring in that love, bring in that listening, bring in that surrendering to the relationship. That's going to feed into the friendship part quite a bit. Okay. So I have another question here. Once again, I had to get out and do a little bit of research on this one for myself, because this is some things I had to learn about. But the question I was asked are you familiar with these seduction sites, meaning YouTube sites, websites, and what do I think about them? And the person asking said, I've tried some of the things that these sites recommend, and it really doesn't seem to work to get women interested. So I had to visit a few of these sites, and I'm not trying to say anything derogatory about any of them, and of course I won't name any of them for obvious reasons. And I've talked with some of my students and friends who've watched and even practiced some of the stuff they teach or they suggest in these seduction sites. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it might be worth your while later on to go to some of these things and just kind of get an idea what they're about. But basically, they seem to be primarily the ones I visited were coaching men on how to be attractive to women, and how to, in quotes, pick up women, and how to navigate this whole thing. And what I witnessed, what I saw in these sites was not at all compatible with my idea of a healthy relationship building. Much of what I was seeing here was it smacked of teaching you how to be manipulative or exploitive, downright abusive sometimes to another person. And it wasn't whether it was male or female. Some of these sites are also geared towards females being this way towards men. The ones I saw were primarily about men, but is all based on power over how to dominate, how to get power over someone. And this whole idea of seduction seemed to be defined as a way to get power over someone else, which of course I've already explained is not compatible with a successful relationship, in my opinion. It seems to be, these sites seem to be based on I don't think this whole segment of our society, this whole age group is buying into it, but it does seem to reflect a bit of a phenomena or a deformed view of what it means to be a real man, or a confusion of what it means to be a real man or a real woman. And part of the problem is that we've outsourced that definition, that defining of ourselves to advertising and whatever the media comes up with, whatever the latest advertisement or fashion or movie idol or what have you is that how we define real men or real women. Real men and real women as well, but I'll speak from my own perspective. Real men are not abusive or cruel. That's not how they show strength, and that's not how they attempt to be attractive. And if someone is attracted by abusive behavior or being exploited, they've got their own issues. That's coming from their own baggage. And they might even need a little bit of guidance or professional help. And I think I want to make that really, really clear, is that these are people working off of mutual imbalances. If it's a man who's thinking to be a real man, he has to be, the power player and the exploitive and abusive and these types of things, and the woman feels like that's the role she needs to play. She needs to be submissive or abused. You're both off base, and you need to work this out. You need to do your own personal work. You can go to my channel and see if that can help you out using the 4-step path. If you need professional assistance, I highly encourage you to do that. But that can be dangerous over time. Honestly speaking, I'm just going to be flat out blunt with this. I see all this seduction stuff, all this advice I see, and I think it's the ramblings of immature men who are working from a platform of some inner fear and insecurity. Well, that could stir some stuff up tonight if anybody's watching this. Chat in, show me that I'm wrong. There's some guys out there or women who think I'm wrong. Please let me know. But I feel pretty strongly about that. Okay. Once again, I want to encourage you to be chatting in and let me know what you're thinking. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know you're out there, folks. Let me see who's out there this evening. All right, so I've got some specific questions about relationships here. This question asks this. I need to break up with my boyfriend. We're not married and we've been together for 2 years. And I think I'm going to text him to break up. A friend recommended it and said it was way easier to break up that way. Well, breaking up with folks, of course, this is by text is not my generation, but I definitely I'm familiar with it. It's not my style, and I can't really believe anyone will appreciate it. I don't care how old you are, it's going to be a little hollow, a little weak if someone breaks up a relationship over a text. In fact, I think it's crazy to do unless you're trying to be vague and misunderstood. And if you're trying to be vague and misunderstood, then you probably don't have the courage to be honest and direct. So shame on you. Human personal communication is 55% body language and facial expressions, and only 7% the actual words that we say. We have eyebrows. That's why we have eyebrows, to communicate with our facial expressions. Now, I know with the texting, these emojis are used, but I think it's lame, and they're just outsourcing facial expressions, really. They don't really do the job of communicating. I really believe that if you need to break up with someone, if you went to the work of having a relationship, man up or woman up enough to do it face to face. Now, if you can't be in the same room face to face, at least FaceTime them. Do something there where you can get maximum communication going. And don't shave your eyebrows. It's kind of creepy. Okay. All right. So I'm going through some of these other questions. I have another one. This is going to go back to the person who chatted in earlier about men and women don't seem to communicate. I had someone ask me, I guess there's a new television show. Is it a movie coming up? Television show, Battle of the Sexes? Yeah. And so this Battle of the Sexes, that term, that phrase, that goes back to when I was a kid. So I was asked by someone, is the Battle of the Sexes a real thing? Is there really a Battle of the Sexes? And I think that it surely seems that way at times. But I think this idea is misunderstood because men and women misunderstand each other primarily. Men and women are different, but just at various levels, not just being physical. We have different emotional constitutions. There's certain thinking patterns that are different. And this is clearly by design. It's by design. Okay? If we were the same, it wouldn't create attraction. Opposites attract in very many ways. Not just opposite personalities, but men and women, I think by design, are complementary. it looks like it's conflicting, but actually if understood and done right, we fill in the spaces for each other. One of the things I remember actually even discussing this with someone else the other day, and I was using the analogy of magnets. Magnets have a positive and negative pole. And if you put two magnets together, if you put the two positive sides together, they repel each other. But if you flip it around, negative to positive, they attract. Okay. And I think this is kind of the sort of a universal idea with male and female. And it can be male and female energies or proclivities, even in a same-sex relationship, I think. The opposites are attracting each other, and they're complementary. This way they dance. And the battle results when you don't really realize this, it's a dance. If you don't realize it's a dance, it looks like a conflict and becomes a conflict. But if you accept and embrace and respect and nurture the differences between the male and the female, then you realize, okay, in the beginning, just like any relationship, it's like a dance. In the beginning, you take turns leading and following, let's say. But over time, that leading and following even drops off. And then the relationship just flows. But it flows back and forth. But it takes a real mature understanding that these differences are inherent and they have a purpose. Reminds me of I'm sure many of you are familiar with that yin-yang symbol in the Chinese tradition, where you have the black and the white, almost looks like fish in the circle, and one seems to be chasing the tail of the other type of thing. And there's in the black segment of the yin-yang, there's a white dot, and in the white, there's a black dot. And what this represents is the white and the black represent the male and female energies as they dance together. And there's an element of the female in the male and the male in the female. So this idea of all of life is about this gentle tension or spark between them. If everybody was the same, there wouldn't be that spark, there wouldn't be that momentum, and that tension that brings out the joie de vivre, the joy of life, the passion. This is because we're different. And yes, it's a job to learn to communicate. Yes, it's hard, but it's worth it. You fight the flow, conflict results. You go with the flow, and it generates passion. All of nature works this way. When men and women learn to understand the two natures and the nature of the opposite sex, then there's no better or worse sex. It's just different and complementary. So I hope that answers that idea of the battle of the sexes, and I hope it also helps to answer that question I just got. And then I have another question. He says, what if the male totally relates to other males, however, has difficulty communicating fully with females? Well, and I'm going to say that that's probably pretty common. It's a pretty common thing that guys are going to be initially more comfortable talking with guys because they haven't, they're comfortable. They're in their comfort zone. It's what we don't have to work at it. I can sit down, let my hair down with a guy, and I'm not uncomfortable. I'm not. We communicate on the same level, but it takes work to do that. Have that same level of communication with the female. And here's the thing I believe. I don't think we should ever expect it to be identical. Guys and women, I suspect, tell me if I'm wrong, I suspect women are going to have the same thing, that women are going to be more comfortable talking with women. There's going to be, because you have a language, you have a way of, you can share things. You're not dancing the dance with another woman in the same way. So I think that's going to be the case there. Men are just going to naturally be more comfortable. Women are going to be more comfortable talking to other women. The key is that can you work together with mutual respect and learning to listen? Can you do it? Can you learn to Can you learn to talk? Okay. If I didn't answer your question fully, get back with me. I think it's important too. Let me just expand on that. I think it's really important for guys when they're having, especially when they're in relationships with women, and women when they're in relationships with men, that they have an outlet. The guys have an outlet to hang out with the guys and talk. Women have an outlet to talk with the women, because there'll always be that comfort zone, and this is just who we are. This is just who we are. Men and women come together, and they have a different type of relationship. You can be the best of friends, but it takes you may never exactly be the same buddy that your partner's buddies are to him, and vice versa with the women. Okay. So going on to this next question. This guy says, I'm 35, I'm a single guy, and I feel a lot of pressure to get married. Most of my friends are married and tell me it's the way to go, but I'm not really feeling it. Not really feeling it about getting married. So what to do here? Well, I'll say right off the bat, marriage isn't for everyone. Marriage isn't for everyone. And we're fortunate, I think, in this day and age that we live in a day and age where it's not a big social stigma to be single as it used to be. I'm not saying that there isn't some stigma, some vestige of that left over. But when it comes to getting married, I think you need to examine your feelings on marriage, and if you have resistance to it, what's behind that? Are you imbalanced by running around trying to look at every woman that you date as a marriage partner? I mean, is it constantly that, or are you going in the other direction where you have some resistance to the idea of marriage in general? This is where some very basic self-assessment. What's the basis? What's the foundation of your feelings towards the whole thing of marriage? A lot of times that's based on what we saw role model in our lives. Our parents, we saw a crappy marriage role modeled by our parents. We may have one view of marriage, or we've seen all of our friends get married, all of our peers, and they all seem to be in terrible marriages and getting divorced, or miserable guys. We're going to start to form an opinion about it. But understand what your feelings are. How to step back and look at yourself. How does this fit into my life? Why am I responding? Why am I responding this way to the idea of being married? Is it because there's social pressure? Is it a personal rant or a cultural chant that I'm responding to? All the cool kids are doing it, so I need to do it. Looking at every relationship as marriage potential, you might start to be dragging. That might be a filter that you're dragging it through. In a perfect world, you hold on to each relationship. You come into a relationship and you hold on to it lightly. When I was in college, I was on the fencing team, and my fencing coach told us the way to hold a sword was you hold it as if you had a small bird in your hand. If you hold on too tightly, you crush the bird. If you hold on too loosely, it flies away. And I think that's a great analogy, a great guidance for a relationship, especially in the beginning. Don't try to form it. Don't try to mold it. Hold on so tightly you crush it, wanting it to be something, a marriage potential. But don't hold on to it enough to explore it. Don't let it fly away. Don't try to fit it into any particular mold, and don't discount it. Whatever it's going to be, let it come naturally, and just pay attention. You can't force a relationship into a marriage and expect happy results. That's my experience. You just can't force it. If you go, it doesn't work that I've seen. Get clear on your feelings, and do your homework. Do your self-assessment. Okay. So I have a question. We're getting down to the wire here, but I'd like to answer this other question before we end up running out of time tonight. I'm a 33-year-old a professional woman. I'm not married, but I feel I need to have children to be successful in my life, at least according to my family and my married friends. What do I think? Well, again, like marriage, feeling the pressure to start procreating, making babies for women can be very confusing too. We have to understand what's behind that. You know, at a certain age, women have the biological clock is ticking, and just nature is kicking in, and they realize it's maybe sometime in their early mid 30s they start feeling this, maybe a little later. This biological pressure to procreate, but also realizing that their window of opportunity is closing a little bit. And so they're feeling a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's cultural pressure, sometimes it may be even coming from if they have a particular religion they adhere to. A lot of times that's coming from the family pressure to produce grandchildren. All of this seems to come in, and there's still a vestige, I think, in a lot of people's lives of this idea of being a successful woman means you have to have babies, have to be a mother. I don't think that's necessarily the case at all. This is a personal choice. This is something that you have to really, basically, again, I'm going to say, get really proficient at self-assessing yourself. What's behind those feelings? What's behind that? What are the legs under these feelings? In reality, the world doesn't need more people. We've got plenty of people running around, and having children is a personal choice. And if you have children for the right reasons and you put them in the right circumstances, it can be a wonderful thing, but it can also go the other way. It can be a very imbalancing thing if you do it at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. Assess your drive. Assess why you're feeling this way. And then you make your own decisions. Hunting down a partner in that mid-30s round, because your clock is ticking, hunting down a procreation partner is really probably not going to work for most people. That is not going to end up being the quality relationship you're looking for. And trying to fit a current relationship into that mold is probably not, it's not necessarily going to bring you where you want to be. Okay, so we've got just a few minutes left. I have a question here. Someone's asking, what are some of the major reasons that marriages break up? And I think I'll go through a couple of these before we run out of time tonight. But that marriages, specifically marriages, but I think you could expand this. Marriages, not just relationships. Okay, I think we can fit a lot of these in the same category. I'll say again, I think one of probably the most fundamental reason a relationship or marriage falls apart is because the partners in the relationship haven't done their own work. They have not gotten clarity. They haven't found about who they are, about what their imbalances are. They're not working on themselves yet. They're not getting clear on their motivations, on their choices, what drives them. And if you don't do your own work, you don't have clarity and balance in your own life, you're going to drag those imbalances and that lack of clarity into a relationship. Now, yes, a relationship you can get into a relationship and you both can grow together and you can both find ways to work on yourselves. We're always working on ourselves. It's not like we're ever done. But the more clarity, the more balance you have on yourself, the more mature you are emotionally as you come into a relationship, I think the greater chance of success. And I'll go back again. Why do marriages or relationships fail? Lack of communication is another big one. Most relationships I've found are reactive in behavior. We get into these patterns of reactiveness. I say black, you say white. Every time she says this, I react this way. Every time I do that, she says these things. And I think we get into these patterns, these ruts, these cycles, patterns of behavior, and many times they're damaging and imbalancing. I think also one of the things I think was kind of important, and once again, tons of books have been written about this. Learning how to fight and how to make up is important. You are going to have arguments, But if you come into a relationship with a basic level of respect and a basic level of understanding that the relationship or the marriage is an entity that you both are surrendering to, that is, and it's not a battle of two personalities all the time. Going in with respect into and learning how to back off, learning how to pause. Learning how to de-escalate, learn to pause, step back, disengage when an argument starts to percolate. That right there, that's the first step of the path, by the way, is just being able to pause, step back, disengage. If it's my wife and I have had to learn to do this over time, we start to see this pattern of reactive behavior start, and we say, oh, time out. You go here, I'll go there. We'll come back in the middle and meet a little bit later, and then maybe we can communicate a little more effectively. You know, allowing the other person room to grow and continue to develop themselves is important as well. I got a number of other things I'd like to throw out here. We've got a couple other questions I'm just not going to be able to get to this evening. But one last thing here is I want to say that marriage legally is a contract, but it's also something we call a covenant. A covenant's an old-fashioned word. We think about the Bible when we hear that, but a covenant is another level of coming together. And it's a contract is conditional. It's sort of a if-then kind of arrangement, a contract. But a covenant is something we hold in a little higher regard. It's not if-then. It's unconditional. Something to think about here. A marriage is not just a legal contract. And unfortunately, we all too often look at it that way. So I'm going to leave you with those ideas. This is something I would, after this chat is over this evening, please keep chatting in. This video is going to be it's recorded, and it's going to be up on the channel tomorrow for all of you to review, to see. Maybe you came in halfway or partway in and you didn't get to hear the whole thing. Continue to comment on it throughout the week as long as you wish. Please give me other topics you'd like to talk about or to discuss. I do want to say that next week, next Sunday, we will not have a live chat. We have, due to some personal circumstances, that we're going to resume it 2 weeks from tonight. Our next live chat will be 2 weeks from this evening, same time, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 9 to 10 o'clock. And with that being said, I want to thank you very much all for being here this evening and being a little patient with any of those technical difficulties we experienced at the beginning. Sometimes we're dealing with internet connections and what have you. Thoroughly enjoyed your chatting in. I thank you. And until we meet again, good night, and I will see you next time.